Welcome to the Low Production, High Value Show with your host, Andrew Jenkins. On the show, we'll be exploring the world of entrepreneurship, social media, and the growing digital landscape. Whether you're a seasoned entrepreneur or just starting out, you know that the world of business is constantly evolving and changing. And in today's digital age, it is more important than ever to understand how social media and technology are affecting the way we do business. That's why on this show, we'll be talking to entrepreneurs and experts who have a wealth of knowledge and experience to share with you. From the latest trends and technologies to the struggles and triumphs of running a business, we'll be covering it all. So if you're looking to level up your entrepreneurial game and become more digitally savvy, then let's get started with the Low Production, High Value Show.
Welcome to the latest episode. Today's guest is Tim Rooney. Welcome, Tim.
Hi, Andrew. Good to see you.
So today we're going to talk about sales. And full transparency, I had the opportunity to work with Tim and be mentored by him related to all things sales. And for those who might be listening or watching who are familiar with Sandler from a sales training point of view, Tim is a Sandler sales training practitioner. And so let's use that as a bit of a jumping off point. You and I have talked about Daniel Pink and some of his books, especially the one Everybody Sells. And people that listen into this show are entrepreneurs, intrapreneurs, and even just people within an organization who have to convince someone of buying into their idea or their business proposition or what have you. Talk to me a little bit about why that phrase by Daniel Pink resonates with you about everyone sells.
Yeah, I think what I like about it is a recognition that, if you ask most people what do they think of salespeople, they probably roll their eyes.
They get cringy about it.
They're cringy about it. So, and what he's saying, basically, first of all, we'll come back and talk a bit more about this, but selling is one of the toughest professions out there. And in today's commoditized world, it's little differences make the difference. And I think that, you have to have great respect for people that keep at it despite, requiring you to do lots of prospecting and activity. So just put that on the side about in defense of salespeople. I have great regard and respect for anybody who's in sales. But as Pink says, when he did his research, he came up to a number, I think it was 67%. He said, of people in reality are selling at some point, not every day necessarily, but if they get into some position where they want to move up the food chain, or they want to get a salary increase, or they want to get a proposition on the table, they're actually selling. There might be the CFO of the company, but if he can't get through the latest big budgets and all that stuff to improve productivity, he's got a selling job, basically. So the principles are always the same. And so that was the key point that I think that Pink made in his book. At some point in line, you could argue we're all in bloody sales, but let's just say his 67%, maybe actively selling, on a periodic basis, as opposed to a one-time sale you had to make. So does that make sense?
Absolutely. I'm in the same camp as you. I believe that part of me thinks, especially when it comes to entrepreneurs, that and we'll get into technique and things like that, but I think part of the reasons many entrepreneurs are successful is that their natural passion for what they're doing carries them quite far in garnering interest and support from whoever they're trying to pitch or sell to, that the enthusiasm they have for what they're doing really comes across. But they inevitably face some people that either that enthusiasm doesn't quite work enough to close the deal, so they have to fall back on more traditional sales techniques, qualifying, making sure there's alignment of needs, et cetera, which we'll explore further. But when I read Daniel Pink's book, I was like, this is it resonated with me so much because it was so true. We're always selling something, whether it's an idea, a service, or a thing. So
Yeah, you touched on something in that which it kind of triggered with me. When you see somebody that's enthusiastic, they've drunk the Kool-Aid and they believe in what they're selling. They're not just going through the motions, and that sticks through. And they're more likely to tell you to go to hell if you don't want to buy, and be relaxed about it, as
yeah.
opposed to endeavoring to persuade you to buy when you don't want to buy. So I think
Well,
yeah,
the cliche comes up like, "Oh, they phoned it in." Yeah.
yeah,
If if they're not enthused, well, one, as you said at the outset, sales is one of the most challenging professions known to in the world, and so if you're not enthused about it, wow, it's even more challenging.
I
Showing up
agree.
every day and having to grind even when you derive no joy from it. So, but flipping it around in terms of how do you succeed, not just through enthusiasm. You've talked about the success triangle, which is based on behavior, attitude, and technique. And we mentioned earlier that we're going to get into some techniques, but let's start with how you define the success triangle.
So, in a topic like how do we make more successful salespeople, it can get quite complicated, and sometimes you lose your way in all the complexity. And if you always come back to the basics, and you're looking at success in sales, uh, the sex will be those three operating in unison with each other, or alternatively, if you're not, it might be one or the other that's pulling you down. So let's just go through them as an
Mhm.
example. The first one would be attitude, and that's a belief in your product, as we spoke about. Have you drunk the Kool-Aid? Are you convinced you're not just going through the motions here? You believe strongly that this product has a place in the marketplace. So that would be the number one. If you don't have that, you can't sell. It's like
Mhm.
you're a fraud, and so that wouldn't work for you. So just
Right.
because you have drunk the Kool-Aid, now you're going to go, well, how am I going to sell this thing? And that would really go back to technique. And technique, you could say, what technique do you need in the Sandler selling system, which you reference? The 7 steps in that process, and we'll touch on some of those as we go through the conversation today.
Mhm.
And so, if you have a system, which is what it is, you can always default to that. You know where you are in the sales pros. You know what the next step is. You can sometimes go back on a step because you didn't execute it very well the first time around, but you know where you are. You know where you stand at any point in time. And if I'm managing you, I'm exactly the same. I can talk about what happened in the sales process. You tell me as the salesperson, I'm the sales manager, and I can start picking up. Well, did you ask this? Did you do that? Did you do this? Which is all part of the selling system. So you can pinpoint where the person is not executing that well. So that would
Mhm.
be the first thing. The and it's vitally important. There are a lot of good tools in there. On the B side, the behavior side, this is deceptively probably the most important of them all, because as we said earlier on, in selling there's a lot of rejection, and you have to have great respect for somebody that continues to do that. And I would say in most commoditized, let me begin again.
Mhm.
I look at most products today and I say to you, I think they're all commoditized. I mean, there's a few apples around and a few other things,
Mhm.
but the differences are small,
Mhm.
and they're not something you can blow people away because you've got the first electric car. Well, good old Tesla will have hit that one, but everybody's got electric cars right now. And the differences are quite small. If you think of something as a high ticket item like a motor car, yes, there's styling and that type of thing, but they've got products in each different category. It's like they've got something for everybody. They've covered the whole market in most cases. Okay, so if you go back and you just say, okay, given that your probability of making a sale is as little as 5 and maybe lower sometimes, depending how commoditized you are, imagine how many rejections you're going to get. You're going to get hundreds.
Mhm.
And being human, you're going to feel awful about that. You're going to kind of, you're going to go, I'm a complete bloody user. I worked all day, didn't make a sale. And I worked a week, I didn't make a sale.
Right.
And for high ticket items, you could be working a year and not make a sale. So it's like, okay, we've got to give recognition to that. Anybody that's doing the behavior, as we say, and that's your prospecting strategy, executing on that.
Mhm.
How many hours a week were you dedicating? How many calls were you going to make? What was your strategy? Did you execute on it? Because that's where, if you said to me, where do most people come up short? I'll lay odds on 10 to 1, it's the chances are they're not doing enough behavior. Sure, if they are not doing the behavior, then we might be able to fix their technique or, some other aspect of their hang-ups about attitude kind of idea. But the
Mhm.
chances are it's behavior. And if people said to you, tell me, which is more important, attitude and behavior? And most people instinctively will say, oh, well, in sport, attitude is everything. The truth is, it's the other way around. When you do the behavior in selling and you get that affirmation that I'm not running away from the sale, that's a huge, huge, great feeling. I didn't get any sales today, but I executed and I did what I said I would do.
Right.
That's powerful reinforcement. And if you're managing anybody, I'd say, well, that's the thing. Give them credit for doing the behavior. They might have got the sale. They might have hammed it up. We can fix that. But if you aren't prospecting enough and you only take 10% of your time prospecting, guess what's going to happen?
Mhm.
You're going to be beaten by somebody that is prospecting more than you, who's got the
Well,
same skill set.
the two questions arise from what you just shared. One, when you talked about the seven steps of the Sandler methodology, if I screw up a step, are you of the belief that I can go back and repeat that step to improve upon it with the same prospect, or there are certain steps that if I screw it up, well, I've lost that opportunity.
I think it depends on the circumstances. What's the bonding and rapport like? Let's assuming I've established a really good bonding and rapport with you right at the outset. We can kind of have some things in common. We like each other. We're communicating well, and I like you. And then I do a poor execution on the pain probing for the problems that we're going to. I fluff up. I forget to ask some questions. I moved too quickly in the sales process. I got caught into talking about my product far too early. I can, backtrack. I might just say, listen, sorry, Andrew, I probably screwed up here, but do you mind if I backtrack? I
Yeah.
want to ask you some more questions. So if you've got your wherewithal about you, know where you're in the sales process, and you sometimes go too far ahead, you've got to drag the customer back. So do you mind if we just backtrack a little bit? We're
Does
getting
that
into
have a?
solutions.
Oh, sorry. Keep going.
I'm getting into solutions already, and I don't think I've done a decent job of really figuring out, what's important to you. So, do you mind if I ask you a few more questions? That would be a typical,
Right.
catching yourself, recognizing that you're ahead of the game.
Does that bode well for building rapport and trust?
Yeah, I think it does. Anytime that you can kind of, look like you're not Mr. Superstar salesperson, I think that bodes well for you as well. You don't want to look a complete klutz, but on the other hand, it makes you more human than this slick salesperson, right?
Well, you don't look like you have the agenda of I'm here for the close and nothing else.
That's exactly well put.
Well,
Yeah.
and the other thing I wanted to ask you was, you talked about making hundreds of calls or outreaching to hundreds of people in a week or whatever the cadence is. Maybe you have a 5% closing ratio or whatever it might be. Some have talked about, for a 5% closing ratio, out of 100 people, that means 95 people said no. And some people have talked about this idea of for every no, that means I'm closer to the five that are saying yes. I'm wondering, what's your take on that? Are you in that same camp?
Well, I
About
think it's true, but it's a bit cliched. Uh, and we've all heard that before. It's like, oh, here goes the boss giving me a pat on the head kind of idea. So it's not something that I would go, oh, that's great, thanks a lot. I've heard it before, but it's a truism in a way. But
Mhm.
it is true. But it's repeating the fact that don't worry. You just have to do the bloody behavior. You will, if you stick to this, we know you'll get a close. Five in 100 times, and that's pretty extreme, let's say. But and yet that comes down to somebody that maybe is doing cold calls, and we would say, don't do cold calls, make warm calls, warm them in some up way. I've done some work in your industry. I don't know you, but maybe we should have a chat. So I was just thinking about it just a few minutes ago, and I don't know about you. I'm getting hundreds of emails at the moment from people offering me to help me with lead generation. And I know these people are social media experts, or so they claim to be. And they always say, click on here, we'll have an interview today, or something like that. Or I'm free this week. Would you like it? And what I love about it, the scripts are exactly the same.
Yep.
They don't know who I am from a bar or so. And more importantly, I never hear them on the phone. Not one of those people has left a phone message for me. They're all using email. And I go,
Spray and pray.
Spray and pray, and the messages are always, they're ridiculously close to each other. It's like, are you interested in getting more leads? Well, no. Is Rooney and Partners or, won't make Butcher interested in getting more leads? And, depends where I am. And then I know, where did they get my name from? I haven't any clue. I'm a list with thousands and thousands of other people. But I kind of go, is your database good? Is your marketing any good? If you're a lead generation company, why are you prospecting me? What makes you think that I'm a good candidate? So you must get the same things. Andrew.
I get a ton by email, and I get a ton in my inbox on LinkedIn. I make a bit of a sport of it, especially for the ones on LinkedIn who they've used they're using some automated solution. They're using keywords that I've used to describe the work we do, not the industry I'm in. And so sometimes they'll say, I get messages like, as a financial advisor. And I'm like, I'm not a financial advisor. We do work with them.
I need money, but
well, so then I'll reply saying, your targeting is all wrong. So if you are going to use the same methodology on my behalf to reach out to organizations, I'm not going to put my personal and corporate brand at risk if you're so off the mark for targeting. And I never hear from them again.
Absolutely not. No,
because it's too risky to put my personal brand and my corporate brand in their hands. But it makes for a natural segue to and kind of drawing from something you mentioned earlier about commodities. As you said, like all these people are blasting out these emails. They're all so very similar. What advice do you have for people to differentiate themselves, whether they're selling an idea, a product, or a service?
I think a couple of things that you can't make magic out of nothing.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're selling financial services, you're selling insurance, those are as commoditized as you can imagine. So, the first thing is say, just maybe being creative. And this wasn't an elevator pitch, but it was a pitch of sorts in a way. And it came out when In Search of Excellence came out, which was, God knows when that book came out, but a long time ago. It was a quote from Scandinavian Airlines, and the guy was Jan Carlson, and he was the CEO of Scandinavian Airlines. And I don't think it even exists today. It might do. I don't know if it does, but it was regarded as the classically great company that like British Airways used to be in the old days. And so he was asked what makes you different, and he said, you know what? He says, we don't aim to be 1,000% better at any one thing. Our aim is to be 1% better at 1,000 little things. That's brilliant, because you'll know on a flight, if you go on a flight, there are hundreds of opportunities to screw up or make a difference, right? From the blanket you're given, the pillow you get, the second drink they ask you you'd like to have, the apology for the delay. There's so many opportunities for these people, these organizations today, to pull themselves out from just a ticket that gets you from A to Z. So I absolutely love that one. The other one I would say is a little combination, a little bit of negative reverse selling, where you say, you know, let's be frank, we sound a lot like our competition. In fact, if you look at it, there are many similarities. But if you said what makes you different, I'd probably say, a little bit like the car agency, Avis, who had that brilliant campaign against Hertz when they were number two. We may be number two, but we try harder. And what a brilliant way to kind of position yourself, to kind of just say, I'll give you my business. You're not big, fat, and bloated like the brand leader, and you're trying harder. That kind of encapsulated. You can use
You're
it
not
yourself.
complacent.
Not complacent. And you can use that same thing and then just say, we listen really, really hard to what our customers truly want. And then we aim to deliver 100% of the time. And I guess that those are the two things that probably make us different. So you can frame it like that, as opposed to blah, 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 120 years in business. Who cares,
There's many others that have been around the same length of time. But it makes me think of, James Clear in his book Atomic Habits, and he gives anecdotes about talking to, I think it was a cycling team, and how they achieved their goals. And they said, we didn't strive to get to the end goal so much as we strived to get 1% better each day or each interval. And the end goal looked so far removed from where they were, so distant, but those 1% increments just gradually lifted their trajectory. That's all.
And Andrew, that is used, as you know, is used in a lot in sport. And the difference between 4 days of golf, oh my God, I want to win. I had a great first round. Well, buddy, there's a long way to go. And you hear them talking about, one shot at a time, and you hear them not getting, imagine those Coco Golf, thinking about the $3 million prize. No, I'll win one game at a time, and I'll just keep my head down and don't get too carried away, and don't get despondent when I have you quickly have the resilience to get back, because you just lost 1 point. So bloody what? There's a lot more chances for you to get back in the game.
Yeah, I've never forgotten this. Owner of a menswear store where I used to work, he instilled in us the habit of, and this is why you see it with many other retailers. So we'd be at the counter, and I've sold a suit and a bunch of other things, and I would say to the customer, "Do you need any socks?" And someone would say no, but you had to have the habit of always asking.
Yeah.
And one day I said, I questioned why, or the reasoning, and my boss said, if I have X number of socks sold in a week because everyone asked, and then that translated to that much, he said, I can pay someone's salary just in socks alone at the end of the year.
I can
And I
believe
was
it.
like, oh,
Yeah.
the $5. Like, I wasn't even thinking the math. I was just thinking about, am I annoying the customer with the question? But the customer is already, in a sense, in their mind bought, because we're at the counter completing the transaction for all the other stuff. And we have rapport, we have trust, and they're already in the right frame of mind. And I go, do you need socks?
And now, a word from our sponsor. Social media has become an imperative for almost every business. Discover how to successfully implement an effective social media strategy that is supported and integrated throughout every part of your organization with this essential book from our host, Andrew Jenkins, Social Media Marketing for Business, Scaling an Integrated Social Media Strategy Across Your Organization, is now available from Amazon or KoganPage.com.
Andrew, that's analogous in selling. Let's assume that we've come to the end of the sale and I'm not going to make the sale, or I'm making the sale with you. And it would be say, Andrew, listen, it's been a pleasure to kind of chat to you and look forward to working with you. Before I push off today, I don't suppose there's anybody who you think I should be talking to. And it's that extra pair of socks there. Mostly they'll say, if I can think of anybody, I'll let you know. But you bookmark it in a way. Later on, if we've done a good job, and only if we've done a good job, probably 3 months from now, I'm going to come back with your permission. And if we've hit the jackpot in terms of what we promised you, maybe we can spend a little bit of time at that stage talking
Yeah.
about some introductions. And that's another pair of socks to it doesn't always work, but it's kind of part of your shtick.
Well, it's one of the other things I wanted to talk to you about was this idea of you only fail at prospecting if you fail to prospect. And I'm paraphrasing your
You
phrase,
cannot
but
start prospecting unless you fail to prospect. Yeah.
yeah, they that um, asking, do you need socks, or asking, assuming we do right by you in a few months, I'd like to come back to you and potentially get considered for some referrals or introductions. I just went through that exercise. We're 4 months into a new client engagement, and I did a process I've done with you before. I put them on Zoom, shared my screen, and said, here's a list of people. I do not expect or assume that I would be introduced to all of them, but I want to refresh your memory, and you tell me thumbs up, thumbs down from this list. Is there a subset?
That's really good because, let's be frank, most people on the spur of the moment can't think. And it's not because they don't want to help you, but because, you're not top of mind at that point in time.
No.
And you've kind of caught them by surprise. You didn't say, oh, by the way, at the end of the meeting, I'm going to ask you if you know anybody I should be
Yeah.
introduced to.
So
So
this
I
was
think
time scheduled. He knew
you do
what it
the
was
heavy
about.
lifting. You do go onto LinkedIn, identify the people you know are a decent profile for you,
Yep.
and you're helping them. No, yes, no, thumbs up, that's very good. That works for you quite well, I would imagine. It's not
Yes.
something I've done, quite honestly.
I do it quite regularly, doing it again tomorrow, because you talked about have a warm call instead of a cold call. I'm
Yeah.
just increasing my odds of a warm call. And I either say to them, okay, so let's say I think it was like 47 names. I said, I don't even, I set the stage. I, please, respectfully, I would never dream of asking to be introduced to 47 people. But these 47 at a high level look interesting, may be appropriate. Where I need your help is to look at them and go, thumbs up, thumbs down. I know them well enough and have a trust and rapport with them that they would take a call from me or a recommendation from me to speak to Andrew. And then I can even make it even easier for them by saying, I'm going to, so I think we ended up with like 12 names. I said, I'm going to go through those 12 names and refine them even further and just say, here's 4, maybe I'd like to talk to or whatever. And I said, you'll have the option of I can give you some language to use to introduce me, or I just need your permission to reach out to them independently, but copying you and saying, in this case, Fabian recommended that I get reach out on the off chance we could speak. So all I had of their time was like 25 minutes to scan a screen.
Yeah, that's a mini process, a mini step, isn't it?
Hmm.
And it takes practice to get the wording right, to do your homework, and I'm sure you've become better at it as you've gone along.
Yeah, and the key is they're opening their network, and you've used a phrase that I've often heard, which is "your network is your net worth." So, and the other phrase that most people have not heard this, but it has stayed with me. I did a research paper about social media a number of years ago, and there was an expression when Russia moved from communist Russia to capitalist Russia that people networks were integral in that process. And there was a phrase or an expression, favors of access. So if I'm asking for an introduction or a referral from you, I'm asking for the favor of access to your network. So I have to be gracious and respectful that I'm not going to blow it. I'm not going to embarrass the person who's made the introduction or the referral because it's their network that they've been so kind to open to me.
Yeah, and I think their receptivity will be based on their comfort in the relationship they have with you.
Well, whether it's through a referral or it's someone you got through to and it's a warm call, those initial few minutes from in terms of the steps taken to build rapport and trust and to execute one, if not several, upfront contracts. Talk us through that process a bit.
Okay, so the first step, there's two. The big one would be bonding and rapport, and that's right through the sales process. So you can't be too good at active listening. You can't be too good at asking good questions. You can't be too good at being curious and genuinely, making sure you've understood. And there's some tools there to help you make sure you're getting the right message there. But once it's a
Sorry to interject. When you say you're not going to be too good, do you mean you don't want to look like you're too scripted about those qualifying questions and sales discovery? Like you want to look like you're naturally curious? Is that what you mean?
I don't know what I said that make you say that, but I think that that would be good. That what you just said anyway, which was you always want to be natural, and you never want to be faking it. And you hear this expression sometimes, which is kind of like fake it till you make it. And to some degree, we have to do that. And if you're kind of very uncomfortable and scared the first time around, you can't walk in there shivering, so you have
Well,
to kind of.
that's more of what I mean. But like you said, you can't be too good, maybe because no one is that practiced with their discovery questions and so on. So ideally, you're still coming across naturally.
Yeah, you don't want to
Correct.
be pitching up as the village idiot, that's for sure. But
Yeah.
you don't want to be Mr. Einstein either. So dummy up and
Somewhere in
things
the
like.
middle.
Yeah. Okay. So I think you're also leading to one of the steps, which is one of the most useful steps within the Sandler setting system, and that's called the upfront contract. And it sounds quick, but if you're executing it properly, it can even take 15 minutes. But in a nutshell, the first thing, Andrew, are we still good for the hour for this conversation we set up today? And you give affirmation. Yes. Listen, if we had to go a bit extra, would you be good with that? Then I would say to you, from an agenda point of view, I think we both know why we are here today. But are there some specifics that you'd like to me to make sure that I help you with today? Some specific questions as you've thought about our meeting today, which you want to make sure that I get covered. Would there be any of those? So that would be over to you to tell me. Yes, I'd like to know about this. Who else have you worked with? What do you think makes you different? It's useful because you get inside their head a bit more.
Right.
Okay, because the first conversation you had with them, you might not get that.
And it might dispel some assumptions you may have made in between the
Yeah,
calls.
absolutely. And then the next part is, my agenda. So my agenda today, by the way, is not to make any assumptions because I've been in this business too long enough to know that every case is different. So to avoid that, Andrew, and with your permission, I'm going to ask you a lot of questions. And I do that not because I want to be a pain in the butt, because I just find that sometimes those subtle differences make all the difference. So if you can bear with me, I'm going to ask you a lot of questions. So
Mhm.
now I'm getting questions to qualify you, basically. Okay, I'm really taking, in some ways, control of the sales process when I do that. Okay, as opposed to, well, why don't you show up and throw up and tell me about why you should sell? We want to avoid that, basically, because we don't know what we've got in front of us yet. We haven't qualified them. Okay, so we're going to tell you that we don't know enough yet to kind of come up with a grand plan for you, bottom line. The next point in the process was we should talk a little bit about outcomes today, Andrew. And it could be that as we go through the process, I figure out I can't help you. I haven't got what you're looking for, and I want to be comfortable. If that's the case, I'm going to tell you that's the story. It could be the reverse of that. It could be that I'm all gung ho and think you're a good fit, but you don't think that. I want you to be very, very comfortable. We know we're not a fit for everybody. If that's the case, you've got to be free in telling me that's the case. We need to move on. I'll get out of here. The other outcome could be that we don't close today, or we might close today. It might be a small sales today, but we don't close today. And if that's the case, then let's say 10 minutes at 10 to 9 today, before our hour's up, I would like you to help me. We could just back off, see where we are and what the next steps are going to be, so we can map those out before we leave. And kind of like, oh, give me a shot in a week's time, whatever. No, let's figure out what's going to happen next. When are we going to get together again? How's it going to be? What are you looking for? And we just map that out to make sure we're on the same page. There's no, as we say, mutual mystification at that stage of the game. So that's probably gets us off to a good start, if that makes sense to you.
Mm-hmm. Well, I call these sort of, I don't forgive the sports analogy, like moving the ball down the field. Like every little yes or acknowledgement or confirmation, and there's some inherent rapport building with that, and also like if you have to turn it back and say, well, thank you again for allowing me to ask all these questions. It was incredibly helpful to me to make sure that I'm tailoring a service or a solution to meet your needs. And hopefully, and this goes back to what we were talking earlier about differentiation. There may have been other salespeople who didn't qualify as well, made some assumptions that were incorrect, a whole variety of things that if you spend a little more time and apply a little more diligence to the upfront contract process, it could bode well for both you and the customer. But
I like just what you've said there, Andrew. Sounds like I'm trying to take control of the sales process, and I am, but I'm doing it as much for your benefit as for mine.
well,
Just these
you
levels of
you're sort
engagement.
of you're controlling the sales process, but it doesn't feel that way because you
Yes.
keep sort of turning it back to them for acknowledgement, confirmation, and they feel like they're driving the bus. But it's through your questions that you're funneling. It's an overused sales
Let's
term.
both stay in control of the sales process and
Yeah.
not meander all over the bloody show.
Well, and are there? I mean, there's questioning for upfront contracts, but in terms of questioning skills, or do you have some favorite discovery questions?
You know, I think a couple of things. First of all, people buy emotionally and rationalize intellectually. So it's if the questions around asking what are likely to be their pain points and drilling down there are the most likely to get you the sale. Because if you hit a tooth that's got some pain in it and you can drill down, and you hit the mark and you look like you understand
Right.
that, and you don't diagnose too quickly. If you can do that, you've got a huge advantage. And so
Mm-hmm.
typically we know why people will hire us. So in our business it would be you're not getting in front of enough new prospects. When you're getting in front of them, the selling cycle goes on, and you get think it overs, and the sales process just goes to hell in a handbasket. If any of that sounds familiar with you, we may be able to help. So those are the pain points people buy emotionally to fix their problems. If they hear you asking the right questions, they get to believe that you really do understand their situation, and you obviously need to go down. And there are some tools that are allied with that process of asking good questions. So the
Right.
first thing is, have you figured out the right pain points to ask your prospect? If you've done that, then there are things which we call dumbing up. And dumbing up was really a tool designed when salespeople first get into sales. They typically do what we call show up and throw up. So they get into it, and there's no qualification, and they're into solution selling right at the get go. So we use a percentage to say it should be in that first meeting. It should be they're talking 70% of the time, and you're asking questions. So if you do that, you're on the right side of the football field, basically. Okay, always behind the prospect, never going too fast, never trying to jump in and sell because you hear a little bit of pain. Oh, we can fix that. That might not be the problem. Okay, because sometimes they misdiagnose the problem. It might be part of the problem, but maybe there are more problems that are more important for you to discover. So dumbing up is not being so smart. Maybe it's using words like, I'm not sure if I'm getting this correctly. Maybe I'm losing things here with you, Andrew. Do you mind just recapping? I kind of didn't quite understand what you were saying. That would be
Right.
part and parcel. One, it could be genuine, okay, and it should be genuine. But when you've made a deal with the person that they're going to make a decision at the end of your presentation, they say we want to think it over. You might just say, I'm a little bit confused. I thought we had an understanding that, today was the day with all the people here, we were going to make a decision to move forward. Did I miss something? That would be dumbing up, basically,
Mhm.
without being rude about it. But you're planting your feet a little bit away and holding them a bit accountable in a way that's not aggressive. So it's just like,
Right.
I'm a bit confused. What's happening here? I thought we had everybody, all the decision makers here, you know, you and you told me that you liked what we presented at 80%. I guess we should ask, well, what's stopping you making a decision?
Mhm.
I don't need a decision today, but would be curious to find out what it is that's stopping you make a decision today. If they told you were at 80%, let's say,
Mhm.
right?
Well, and you touched on something earlier. So Andy Paul has talked about um, one of the phrases that makes him cringe is, "What keeps you up at night?"
Yeah. Who's who hates it?
Andy Paul. He has a podcast called The Sales
Okay.
Enablement, and he's written
Yes,
some.
because it's kind of become cliched, hasn't it?
Right. Well, and this goes back to like the same. A value proposition is designed to alleviate someone's pain, provide a gain for them, or help them complete a job. And another cliche is, "I didn't buy a drill, I wanted a hole." So they want an outcome, and that the reason I bring that up is when we were talking about like your discovery questions and so on, what your favorite um, like from a framing, is it better to the pain related questions are more tired, cliched, and I sometimes indirectly just say, social media aside, what are you trying to accomplish in the next 6 months? What are you mandated to do? What are your goals, or what's the pressure on you for? That may be a cloaked pain question, but I'm removing myself and our services from the equation, and to say like, okay, what's your mind on for the next 6 months, and then we figure out where and how social media might play a role. And that changes the dynamic of the conversation.
I think it's part of completing the picture which you're trying to do. Give it context, right?
Hmm.
So you might be brought in, I might be brought in to fix my sales force. But we come back to the problem a customer brings you is never the real problem. Is that the real problem? Is it the sales force, or they can't sell because you really haven't got a product that's differentiated and you haven't figured out how to sell it? So you've got a marketing problem more than you have a sales problem. And we can't fix your salespeople until you figure out what's your differentiation, who you are. And, so,
Right.
that's a good example where, you know, it's where you are going to look around. You're kind of like, help me understand the context of what are you operating in, right? Because social media is just one element. What are the other elements that you're struggling with?
Yeah.
And that helps you build bonding and rapport, credibility. You're not a one-trick pony. You can look at
Yeah.
the whole picture.
Well, I often say if you are executing your marketing poorly, or you suck at selling, and then you apply social media to it, it's only going to amplify your shortcomings,
Totally,
and nobody
totally.
wants that. So, and just in the time we have remaining, I wanted, if you had, I mean, Sandler has 7 steps, and I'm not here to say give me the Coles notes, but especially for people who aren't familiar with Sandler's methodology, is there one primary, I'll call it activity or step? Is it behavior? What would you leave people with to have them reflect on, and perhaps incorporate or recalibrate in their day to day from a
Okay,
sales
so
perspective?
remember we just said bonding and rapport. It's not right through the process. Okay, so you can't be too good at that. Active
Yeah.
listening, curiosity, etc. The second one, execute your upfront contract. Then you've got really three qualifying steps. The first one would be, what problems do you have that I fix? We call that pain. Okay, so and there's ways to put down a questionnaire
Right.
enunciating the typical pain points. These
Right.
are symptoms of a problem. Which ones do you have? Like a doctor. Tell me more
Right.
about that. Why is that a problem? That's the
But
pain.
that's the exercise they need to go through to reflect on what they provide or don't provide in relation to those pain points.
Correct. Okay.
Yeah.
So then we said, okay, what are the other two steps that we have to do? Having done that, we need to talk about budget. And budget would be, what do you have a budget? What were you thinking about it? Typically for this kind of problem, we will be talking about that. Does that make sense to you? Those are all the budget questions. Having got the budget decisions, we need to get to the next step, which sounds simple, but again, can take time to do it properly. And that's the who, what, where, when, and how. Who else besides you needs to be involved? How do decisions like that? What criteria will you use to be judging who we are, why we should have business? Those three steps basically entitle you now to a presentation because I've qualified you. So
Right.
we call that fulfillment. I come along and make a step. If you said, yay, good, I do one more step, which is post-sale. Two things there. How do we avoid buyer's remorse? Is there anything you might possibly be still uncomfortable about? Let's talk about that. And then the second one would be, I don't suppose anybody we should be talking. Those are the 7 steps, and they sound glib and easy, like I've just given you, but there's a lot more depth to them and subtlety to them when you're using them in reality.
But if they become somewhat of a habit and somewhat innate, you become less conscious that I'm now on step 2. And
Absolutely. And you sometimes get forced into the next step because they drag you there and you've got to go, okay, I know where we are now. No, you can't go there now because we're not on step this. No, okay.
Yeah.
We'll
ultimately, you want people to get into a flow of the methodology.
Yes, absolutely.
I mean, that's the holy grail. Well, listen, thank you so much for everything you shared today. It's really appreciated, and I know that those that watch and those that listen will appreciate it too. So thank you.
So appreciate being with you, Andrew. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of the Low Production High Value Show. Be sure to give us a rating and subscribe to make sure you never miss an episode. Don't forget to check out Volterra at volterradigital.com to learn more about how they can support your social media marketing.